Okay, ladies and gentlemen, well, thanks for coming along to Benarty's third evening of speakers. I got involved with the referendum debate just because I was fed up listening to turning the television on and listening to Leckie on the soapbox. And then you turn it over to the other channel, and then you get the Westminster crowd saying their piece. So I sort of got fed up, and then I went over to Edinburgh one night to listen to George Galloway, who I thought was okay until I come home and thought about what he was saying and why he was saying it. And that sort of put me onto the yes side. So thanks very much, George. The Westminster crowd would just keep on rattling on about this and that, and lies and everything. To use a sort of an old Scottish word, they were just slithered. And you could sort of add your own word to the end of that if you want. Then we had, I called them the three amigos coming up. Josie Osborne, Alistair McDonald, and then Danny Alexander, who I still think is one of the third member of the Alexander brothers, because he's certainly not a politician. And we had these lies after lies, and this could happen, and that could happen, and it's the same way we had chief executives of these companies, and we could be moving, we could lose jobs. And we had that years and years ago, even with companies like Standard Life, but they're still here, these companies. So all these companies are still going to be here in September the 19th. The Yes campaign seems to get stronger and stronger every day, and when you listen to the previous speakers we've had here, and probably tonight, there's no lies, and there's no could be's and maybes. It seems to be all facts that comes through the Yes side, and that will continue. What we're going to do now is we're going to have some questions. If we could, what we'll do is we'll have 3 questions at a time, and we'll make them short questions if you can, and hopefully we'll ask the panel to give short answers. So we'll fire it straight on. First question, anybody? Gentleman there, and if you could give your name.
My name's John. It's for you.
John, can you put your mic up just so people can hear your question?
It's a question about abuse. A man,
I can see where this is going.
A man described us as cybernauts. Now, we've been accused of all sorts of things, but the abuse level that you personally, and people like the Weirs, who gifted the SNP millions of pounds, by a Tory MP, a List MP in Scotland, not once but twice in 2 days after Chris Weir had asked for respect. Do you not think the abuse is actually coming from the other side? And I'm quite regarded to be very aware we're watching you as well.
Leave us away.
Okay, another question? Come on, folks. Thomas? No need the mic, Thomas, okay? Yeah. Don't be singing either, Thomas.
That's what I'm feared of. Listen, I'm a socialist. I'm a member of the Red Paper Collective, which you'll get us know about. I need to ask a quick question to each of the guys. Alan's going on about this massive radical left uprising that will go. The radical left has been steadily decreasing since 1999. In 2011, it got 1.7% of the total vote. In fact, the radical right, the National Front, the BNP and UKIP got 2.02%. Mere chance of a radical right with the numbers. As a socialist, everybody goes on about socialism. I'm a socialist. I believe in the no nations, no borders, just people. Workers of all countries unite. That's what I believe in, that's socialism. Albert Einstein, quite a famous man. Nationalism is an infantile disease. It is the measles of mankind. That is what we are doing. Just on Europe, we're going to hurtle headlong into Europe. Once we're in Europe, once we've negotiated our way into Europe, a brand new entrant into Europe, we will be subject to the EU's 2012 Stability Treaty. That treaty states annual deficits must not exceed 0.5%. If national debt or borrowing exceeds 60%, it must be reduced by 5% per year. Currently, our national debt is around about 85% GDP. We are faced with austerity driven from Brussels. There's no way around that. Once we're in Europe, that is what we're subject to. Once the transatlantic trade and investment partnership has been agreed between Europe and America, that opens up all public services within Europe to the free market between America and Europe. That means the National Health Service is open for grabs. That's what will happen to us in Europe. We have an opt-out on all those at the moment. How do we square that, sir?
Thanks, Thomas. Do we have another question? Anybody else?
Hiya. I was just wanting to ask you, how would it benefit children's curriculum in Scotland if we were aiming to get independence?
Okay, can we have one more over at the what?
The majority of trade unions are backing no campaign, just backing abuse and that she went to the table up there back, please.
Okay. Well, what we'll do is we'll answer some of these questions first of all. Alan, do you want to start off?
The first question that was asked about abuse. Well, it's not true that all of the abuse is only coming from their side, because I've seen some of it on our side as well. It exists, it's there. I don't think there's as much of it from our side as there is from the other side, and it's not overground. The abuse that exists that comes from the No campaign is explicitly there, front and centre, in the media. And there's been some quite obvious examples of that, quite frightening examples of that. For example, there was an episode of I Get News for You, maybe 6 or 7 months ago. Ray Winstone was the host, and he asked the audience, how many people here want Scotland to bugger off? Hooray! The whole audience cheers. There was an episode of Question Time, and I think it was Doncaster, somebody in the audience said, why don't we give Scotland our independence and then dump our nuclear waste there? The whole audience applauds. And you can see it. The Guardian, that famous cartoon about Alex Salmon from Steve Bell, should Scotland go and fuck itself? Yes, no. Now that is outrageous. That is openly being done in the media. If that was being done in the Scottish media about, say, English stereotypes, there would be an uproar.
The swastika.
The swastika on the salt tire on the Scotland on Sunday is another example. The temerity with which they feel the need to attack I come back to it, the dignity of the Scottish people. Salmon's open for criticism, of course he is. Members of Parliament, MSPs, elected politicians, of course there should be fair and rigorous critique of these people. But what they're going after is Scotland. So the open Scotophobia that's on display, I find personally quite frightening. Now, as far as the attacks on me go, that was certainly an eye-opener. For the last 2 weeks, it's been an onslaught. I put myself out there. I'm quite outspoken. You know, maybe you could say that makes me fair game. But some of the things that were said, the word evil was used by James Macmillan, a respected composer, one of Scotland's great cultural figures. He tried to compare the movement for Scottish independence to fascism, and he actually used the word evil. A peaceful, democratic movement for change in which nobody has been hurt, in which nobody will be hurt. To introduce that kind of word, and where was the media critique of him? It was almost absent. Now, Alistair Gray, about 2 years ago, used the word colonists to describe people at the top of the arts in Scotland. There are almost no Scottish figures, almost no Scots at the top of the arts world running the arts administration. And he asked the question, why, right? Now, you can argue about his language, the word colonist is an emotive term, absolutely. But there was a media onslaught for about a week and a half. It was absolutely monster. But James McDonald used the words evil, and they've not a peep to say. Now, I think what's happening is they're afraid, basically. This is the end of the empire. It's been taken away from them, and they're lashing out blindly. The smears, the distortions, they're essentially sort of firing blindly into the crowd now, because having lost the arguments, and they must be losing the arguments, otherwise we wouldn't be getting grounds in them. They feel now, well, let's just cover everybody in shit. And that's essentially where they're going now. So of course, our side can cross the line. Sometimes I read tweets or I hear people saying things at meetings and you're like, oh man, you're going to know. But I don't consider that on anything like the level that's coming at us just now. And that means we're winning.
I'll deal specifically with the trade union stuff and solidarity, because I did try to deal with it in part, certainly, in my initial speech. I'm a trade unionist, of the Trade Union Branch Secretary, trade union organiser, organised several strikes in North Glasgow hospitals in Glasgow, funnily enough. And those were successful strikes. But they were successful strikes because we organised where our employer was, and strategically it was the way to win. If we had waited for there to be a national movement in Scotland, never mind the UK, to be able to wage that strike and win progressive things for health workers, we would still be waiting. So successful and effective action on behalf of workers has to take place in the context of the times that you're living in. And you asked me the question, how do I reconcile independence with solidarity and trade unionism? In exactly the same way I reconcile democracy of any kind with trade unionism and solidarity. Because it is about the democratic will of people, working class people, to get the government that they want and the policies and values that they aspire to and that are not imposed by elites. I find it hard to reconcile socialism with support, because it's your position is default, de facto support for a state that's still hanging on to the vestiges of imperial and colonial power. Why do you think the UK should be the unique organising unit of working class people? Why is Scotland not capable of being an organising unit of working class people, of voters? Why does it need to be the UK? If supporting independence is anti-solidarity, then why defend the UK? Why not say we should be part of the European United States? Why not say we'll hang out for a world government? Why not say that any nation state is unacceptable? We're still in times where nation states are the way of people's organising across the world. I think you have to explain why, uniquely, the UK has some inherent right, when it exists, to perpetuate inequality and the supremacy of elites and the upper classes. Why that has to be what working class people identify with to organise under, against their democratic will, when they're voting against policies that ban trade unions, when they're voting against governments that take us into illegal wars, when they're voting against governments that want nuclear weapons. Why would you ever defend that state? It doesn't make sense. To deal with the oppression of the left, the hard left, people who have left values are bigger than what you describe as being the radical left. Because, and I mentioned the Nordic countries, and this came up last week, somebody who's another member in your Red Paper Collective. The SNP's white paper's no left-wing enough, but somehow the UK government were to put up with. And the Nordic countries and the common weal and social democracy isn't left-wing enough. but UK Westminster governments have to put up with them. And whilst the hard radical left, which I was party, some might describe it as, for some time, has been making itself feel good about being really revolutionary and hanging out for international socialism, the social democratic countries have been delivering a more equal society. They've been delivering better equality for women. They've been delivering smaller pay gaps, more public ownership, better quality of life, greater work-life balance, better health, better life expectancy, less infant mortality, greater literacy, greater education, all of these things that people say they care about, they've been delivering it. And I would agree with your analysis that it's no socialism. But you hang on to the UK Westminster government. Is that socialism? And which unit of the working class do you think is more likely to deliver any semblance of a socialism that you envisage? Westminster, with Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson competing with the Tories, or an independent Scotland, with a government that we vote for with all of the powers and all of the levers to address inequality? What chance do you really think there is? And sooner or later, every radical revolutionary socialist has to be practical. And if you really want to see progressive change in your lifetime, don't vote no, because you've no chance.
I didn't ask you to square the circle. I asked how you square the circle, being in Europe and being subject to these treaties that are going to enforce austerity on us. That's what I asked. Right? I am not a supporter of Westminster. I am not a supporter of better together, I can assure you. And as you know, if you've been at red paper meetings, we support radical federalism. That's the way we see for it.
You vote yes or you vote no?
Right? I'm voting no.
You're defending the UK state.
Oh, don't be
Do you really think the West can benefit from a no vote? From a...
Don't you accuse me, no, you're supporting the Tories.
If you vote no, you are strengthening the UK state, you are strengthening the right, you are strengthening the elites. They will take that as validation of the way things are. And they will do whatever the hell they want to. And when we promise to stop them, and it'll be in your head.
You can shout what you want, that's a spurious argument.
That's exactly the reality of it. You're either voting yes or you're voting no. If you're voting no, you're strengthening the British elite.
To pick up a point that Carolyn mentioned about solidarity. The solidarity of the working class is not a concept that was invented by the United Kingdom, and it's not a concept that depends for its duration on the unity of the United Kingdom or the unity of any other kingdom. It is something which transcends the United Kingdom. It is something which is truly, or should be truly international, as I said previously, dance and spearings. That includes member states within the European Union, and I accept that there are certain structures within the European Union that require change, but I firmly believe that it's better trying to change by continuing our membership of the European Union. But if the worst came to the worst, and we were not allowed into the European Union, then I think that we would survive in EFTA or whatever other organisation that we wanted to be members of. But it's important that we're not isolationists. It's important that we do build links with other countries throughout the world. I've never believed either that independence is going to lead to some immediate socialist utopia. But if you look at the voting patterns of the people of Scotland over the past half century or so, then we have, by and large, voted for what might be politely called left of centre governments, whether in a devolved situation in the Scottish Parliament, or indeed if you look at the voting patterns at Westminster even before the Scottish Parliament was founded. Now, some of you may think that left of centre is still a bit wishy-washy. Well, so it's a bit better than what we've got south of the border, if I could put it that way, on things that I've given the previous examples of our National Health Service, care of the elderly, education. A lady asked about curriculum for excellence, or curriculum in general. You know what's happening in many places south of the border? They're still fighting battles which we won over half a century ago. You know that Willie Ross, when he was Secretary of State for Scotland in the 1960s, he didn't even require an Act of Parliament. He simply sent out a circular to all education authorities in Scotland saying, stop selection at the age of 11 or 12 and stop all fee paying in the state sector. And every local authority, even the Tory-controlled local authorities, and there were a few around at that time, complied. Whereas south of the border, they've still got selection, they've still got a higher proportion of fee paying, they've still got their grammar schools, and I think that what we have got is a long tradition in Scotland, and a well-established tradition of equality of educational opportunity. Again, things are not perfect, and I've heard criticism of curriculum for excellence, etc. But I firmly believe that although education at present is devolved, if we had the full economic powers of independence, then we'd be able to ensure that curriculum development is backed up with adequate resources for teachers and pupils. A wee bit now about the trade unions voting no. Well, there's been allegations of a bit of manipulation going on here and there, and trade union bosses down in London trying to fix things, but there's some encouraging signs. The STUC seem to be sitting on the fence, as it were, but there are some leading trade unionists, and tomorrow, for example, I am going to be meeting the UCS veterans, the comrades and former comrades of the late Jimmy Reid, and that was a brilliant battle that the UCS fought to try and save Scottish shipbuilding way back in the early 1970s. And quite frankly, I'd rather have the UCS veterans on our side than some of the trade union right-wing barons that are trying to run the show just now. Now, final point is that it's important. I would utterly and unequivocally condemn verbal abuse from whatever quarter. I mean, I'm all in favour of robust debate, including challenging politicians who come out with silly, unsubstantiated statements and even ridiculing them. But I think that we should draw a line and stop the kind of verbal abuse which is going on in some elements of the social media at present.
Okay, anybody else got question? Sorry.
Can I get my question to the EU?
Sorry, Thomas. Just let somebody else.
Can I answer this question of the EU? We're in the EU. We can't get chucked out, and I've had that from the European MEPs that are right in the EU. The only benefit we're going to get when we vote for independence is we'll have 12 MEPs and we'll have a voice at the top table, which we don't have at the moment. So our farmers and our fishermen aren't heard when they're deciding when to get out subsidies. And last month they lost a lot of money because the English Westminster government decided not to argue for the subsidies for the farmers.
Okay, another question? James?
Regarding old age pensioners' bus tickets and free prescriptions and that, do you not think that it's a wee bit too much free this and free that. What should happen is we used to have a system with the bus passes that you paid half a fare at certain times in the day. Right? Plus, if everybody, except children, paid £3 per prescription, no matter how many items is in the prescription, it would save the economy. And independent Scotland.
Okay, Jimmy. Brian?
See here, see there. What tips is not for is that the British taxpayer, if they pay £3.5 million to bury an ex-Prime Minister.
Is there anybody else, guys, who's got a question? Yes, John?
Is that me?
Yes?
In the event of independence and in the event that we don't get a town, the credit rating agencies have given Scotland an A, which is a bit less than we've got at the minute. So there's a very good chance that the value of the new Scottish currency will be devalued. So that affects exports, that affects jobs, and as a final got a view on how that effect will be sorted.
And could also have Peter.
Do you think if a yes vote in Scotland it would strengthen the left in England? Because I think it would eventually.
Sorry, could you repeat that, Peter?
I think a yes vote for Scotland will strengthen the left in the rest of the UK. I think it will be the end of the Canavan government. McTiernan and Ashley's last night on English News Night, they said to resign absolutely without any doubt.
Okay.
Scotland votes yes.
I'll try and be as big as possible. The problem about doing away with universal benefits and starting to impose charges is, I remember when the prescription charge was first introduced, I think it was only 5 pence or something, then it was increased to 10 pence, and now south of the border is over £8 per item. And I think if you combine these universal benefits with a progressive system of taxation, then that answers Joanne Lamont and all these other people who are talking about something for nothing. You redistribute wealth by taxation. You don't do it by taxing the sick. I take your point about the burial costs. Margaret Thatcher's burial costs, and I hope that we don't have any big military or national funerals in an independent Scotland. The value of the currency was raised by someone. The white paper puts 4 options for currency, and the 4 options were considered by an independent commission of experts, including a couple of Nobel laureates, and they said that there are basically 4 options. One being sterling within a currency, a sterling currency zone. The other one being the pound without a sterling currency zone. The other one being an independent Scottish currency, and the other one being joining the euro. And the independent commission did indicate that any one of these options would be a workable policy. The present Scottish government has said that its preferred option is sterling in a currency zone. So, you know, that wasn't exactly my preferred option, but one advantage of that is there will be no transition costs in terms of people or companies in England trading with Scotland and vice versa. The present UK government has tried to rule out a currency zone, but well, we'll see in the fullness of time whether they're just bluffing or otherwise. What will happen regarding the rest of the UK and the chances of success of the left in places in England and Wales and so on? Would a yes vote strengthen the left in the rest of the UK? I think it would. And I'll tell you why, because already at present we are seeing, and you've maybe seen this at question time sometimes, the voices crop up from English audiences saying, how is it that these students in Scotland aren't paying tuition fees, and yet students in our neck of the woods have to pay tuition fees, you know? And there is what's called, very often called the beacon argument, and you know, it's wrong to imagine that in the advance of socialism or in the advance of any kind of social progress, that it requires everybody in the world or everybody in a kingdom to move forward at the same pace. Sometimes a country, even a wee country, can decide to go forward, and maybe other countries, including bigger countries, might say, hey, they are setting an example, let's follow it. Another good example would be Trident. When we get rid of Trident, it will be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to relocate it. And so a nuclear-free Scotland could help to build a nuclear-free Britain, and who knows, after that, a nuclear-free Europe, a nuclear-free world. So it's wrong to imagine that just because we are locked into this United Kingdom at present, that we therefore have to follow all the structures of decision-making within that United Kingdom in order to make progress. There's also the basic democratic point, that it is this, that no country should have a right of veto on the decision of another country, however small, which decides to take a different path. And I would say, for those of you who are socialists, especially a left-wing path.
Okay, Joe, since it's you, we'll give you the last question.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'll amend that.
Since you know this, Joe.
Dennis, you mentioned about the problem with the finance, the pound, who it's going to work out. And the argument was always put up in the past, Ireland, when they become an independent country, in the First World War, they got the pound. When they had the pound for quite a while, till the punt eventually come in, and then at the present day, they'll get the euro, and that on. But I see the carry on at in the House of Commons. I know it's a pantomime at times, but they carry on. And they're saying, that's different. Scotland, it's an independent country. It says that no have boundaries. Ireland's no got boundaries. Though I don't see how it relates back to that time. But the pound obviously was something that should be. According to Gordon Macron, Professor Gordon Macron, he states that Scotland could. And they'll have to face up to it. The UK government will have to, in the financial section, will have to face up to what's been taking place in the real world. So that's you how you consider it. What's your opinion?
Your comparison with Ireland is very interesting, because for long enough Ireland, as you rightly pointed out, was tied to sterling without a formal currency union, as it were. And then when Ireland became a member of the European Union, they joined what was called the European exchange rate mechanism, and they had this thing called the punt. And the Irish punt, although it was initially 1-to-1, it eventually was tied to the European exchange rate mechanism, and so you got a difference. That caused some problems for people trading, especially between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, but it was not insurmountable. And similarly, today, the Republic of Ireland is in the Eurozone, and trade continues. Sometimes when politicians point to difficulties, they don't see that there are solutions very often. Whether these solutions are found by individuals, whether they're found by business people, or whatever. But I don't hear anybody, despite all the problems that Ireland has had in recent years, I don't hear anybody in the Republic of Ireland saying, oh dear, we made a mistake, let's go back and join the Republic of the United Kingdom.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, as Mr. Dimbleby says every week, your time is up. Thanks for coming. I think you'll agree. We had a treat tonight with the three speakers. I'm just wondering if you could show your appreciation once again. Just on a few points before you go. The slips on your chair, if you could fill them in and hand them up at the table. And if you want to be involved in the Benarty or be updated, just leave your name. We have